The coup attempt by Rosemary Adams' company failed, and I was exiled abroad by my brother. I was left with nothing, having lost all my documents. In desperation, I ended up conning a quiet and cold male student. The boy seemed indifferent on the outside, but was pure-hearted within. With just a few tears from me, he was easily persuaded to reveal his true feelings. That winter night, we huddled together in an apartment without heating. Bradley Electra looked down at me, his expression somewhat displeased, and said softly, "Spoiled." Yet his body honestly drew closer, warming my cold feet in his embrace. "Why are you crying? I won't throw you away." But even when I ran off with his money, he never learned my real name. Years later, I faced another business crisis. After finding out the whereabouts of the mysterious big shot behind it all, I resorted to the same trick, and threw myself down in front of their car in desperation. To my surprise, the person who emerged was none other than Bradley Electra. He merely cast a cold glance at me, and scoffed, ready to shed some tears again. I hadn't anticipated that the mysterious figure, who wielded such power over the company, would be Bradley Electra. Now, he looked at me with indifference. As the car window rolled down, he sneered for a moment, ready to cry again. I stood frozen, my eyelashes fluttering in disbelief. My mind felt like it had been jolted in a sudden accident, leaving me blank from the shock. The carefully prepared pleas caught in my throat, and not a single syllable could escape. Bradley Electra coldly withdrew his gaze, signaling the driver to move on. The Maybach logo glided smoothly past me, heading toward the mansion. I gritted my teeth, stood up, and grasped the car handle. "Bradley Electra, please, help me." Rain-soaked, my hair stuck to my face, and my white dress was muddied. I was as disheveled as one could be. Bradley Electra gave a faint smile, mockingly stating, "Rosemary Adam, once wasn't enough for you." I swallowed hard, my knuckles tightening. "Bradley Electra, you said before that you wouldn't abandon me." My heart raced, awaiting judgment. Deep down, I felt utterly insecure. After all, I had swindled him, and fled without a word, betraying both his trust and feelings. Now, to dare to play the emotional card was incredibly shameless of me, but I genuinely had no other choice. Bradley Electra seemed to find my situation ludicrous, slowly curling his lips into a smirk. Yet, as he chuckled, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. A coldness radiated from his sharp, distant eyes. "Rosemary Adam, how dare you bring up the past with me?" His voice trembled ever so slightly, but the rain was too heavy, blurring everything. "Bradley Electra, you're back." A tall woman in a light blue cheapao appeared at the entrance, holding an umbrella, her smile gentle and refined. "Weren't you supposed to wait at home?" The oppressive atmosphere around me dissipated. Bradley Electra gently closed his eyes, his tone softening. "Sitting alone is boring. I wanted to see you sooner. It's cold outside." Bradley Electra's gaze dropped to her rain-soaked sleeves, furrowing his brow and signaling for her to get in the car. The woman shyly lowered her eyes, obediently saying, "All right, I'll know for next time." An invisible barrier seemed to surround them, excluding anyone else. It dawned on me that she must be Ursula Nancy, the fiancée that Bradley Electra cherished, as reported in the news. As I slid into the car from the opposite side, Ursula Nancy finally noticed me. "Who is she?" Bradley Electra lifted his eyelids to look at me, his tone nonchalant. "I don't know her." My heart stung imperceptibly for a moment. Even my breath felt heavy and weighty in my throat, each word a struggle to speak. Embarrassed, I let go, stepping back and bowing deeply. "Bradley Electra, I'm sorry. I intruded today." Those disgraceful memories were laid bare under the light. Now he had a fresh start and a partner. He would surely never want to associate with someone like me again. I couldn't bear to continue, fleeing in shame. Bradley Electra wouldn't lower himself to acknowledge me, leaving me with no choice but to take another path. At the banquet, I lowered my posture, raising my glass and drinking round after round. Everyone welcomed me with smiles, exchanging the politest small talk. But when I mentioned investments, they noticeably brushed me off. The forced smile lingered too long, solidifying into an awkward stiffness that left my cheeks sore. Gradually, my heart sank deeper. A sense of powerlessness washed over me like a rising tide. The alcohol swirled in my stomach, burning fiercely. Through the glass, I caught a glimpse of my pale lips, clutching my belly as I moved slowly to the corner. A group of socialites whispered together, sneering glances at me with exaggerated laughter. I took a deep breath, mustering a decent smile. We were all here for money, there was nothing embarrassing about it. Yet they reacted as if they had encountered some strange creature, their laughter escalating. Such experiences had filled my brief life thus far. I thought I had built up immunity, yet perhaps due to physical discomfort, my nose tinged with acidity. Ignoring them, I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, and took a breath. A tumult of voices surged around me. Flattering compliments poured out one after another. Bradley Electra, do you know that Rosemary Adam from the Adam family? A carefully cautious probe nestled within the flattery. Adam family. I suddenly opened my eyes. Everyone assumed Bradley Electra acted decisively because of some hidden profit in the Adam family, eager to get a taste for themselves. Not far away, Bradley Electra stood with his back to me, a faint smile on his lips. But there was no warmth in his smile, no emotion flickered beneath the surface. I've heard of her. With a few words, he cleanly distanced himself. He had always been clever. The only scam he'd fallen for might have been mine. I lowered my gaze, quietly stepping back 2 paces and moving away in the opposite direction. But I happened to run into that woman from the rainy day. Ursula Nancy approached me, recognizing me. Is it you? What a coincidence. We meet again. I considered pretending I didn't remember, but before I could, Bradley Electra's cold voice interrupted from behind. Are you too familiar? Ursula Nancy detected the reproach in his tone, but continued to smile gently at me. You must be here to ask Bradley Electra for help. I figured that out that day. She turned to Bradley Electra. You shouldn't be so cold-hearted. When a young lady is desperate enough to throw aside her pride to seek help, you should at least consider seeing her. I quickly waved my hands. No need. Bradley Electra's sneer cut through the conversation. Don't let your sympathy run rampant. You might end up being sold out and still counting the money for others. It came just shy of naming names. I froze in place, unsure of what to say. Don't take it to heart, Bradley Electra doesn't mean to target you. He's like this because he was deceived too severely by his ex-girlfriend. I thought suddenly. Bradley Electra's girlfriend really seemed like a wonderful person. So different from a conniving cheat like me. It's fine. I forced a painful smile, feeling my stomach ache a little more. Was Bradley Electra really deceived by a woman before? Which woman was so blind? She must be regretting it now. Could you please hold your tongues? Murphy Tyler, who worked in real estate, approached after hearing the commotion, his beer belly swaying. He patted my shoulder and pulled me close, his gaze murky. Rosemary Adam, facing difficulties. I seized the lifeline, escaping his intrusive grip while ignoring his inappropriate touch, not noticing the deepening shadows in Bradley Electra's eyes. We have a cash flow problem. Then why not come to Murphy Tyler? When your father was around, he often mentioned how capable you were, more so than your brother. Murphy Tyler. My eyes lit up. Just as I was preparing to ride this wave, he slipped a room key into my pocket. Come find me tonight to chat. I've seen you grow up, I can't leave you hanging. I raised my hand, clutching the key tightly in my pocket, feeling a pressure in my chest threatening to explode. After a moment, I tilted my face up, managing a demure smile. Thank you, Murphy Tyler. Watching him walk away with his hefty back, I suppressed the urge to vomit. Xiao Chen, get me a micro camera ready. I pressed the elevator button for upstairs, dialing my assistant. This old lecher liked to play dirty. I figured I'd let him indulge. Since I couldn't negotiate a deal, extorting a little sum wouldn't be bad either. But I hadn't expected when I opened the door to find Bradley Electra waiting inside. Bradley Electra. Before I could even ask, he pushed me against the wall. Instinctively frowning, I closed my eyes, almost sensing the pain my fragile shoulder blades would suffer. Yet the expected pain didn't come. Bradley Electra's large hand cushioned my back, absorbing most of the impact. His fingers spread wide, then moved upward. They tightened again. He grasped my neck, kissing me harshly and roughly. Bradley Electra was so tall he entirely blocked me beneath him. The pressure of the position was overwhelming. I was overshadowed by his presence, unable to resist. Tears spilled out, pricking my eyes with defeat. I sobbed, finding it hard to breathe, until I tasted blood in my mouth. Finally, he pulled away, his voice icy. Rosemary Adam, you truly degrade yourself. My pupils trembled slightly as I realized he misinterpreted everything. But what was left to explain? We weren't in a state where misunderstandings could be resolved to renew old ties. I had indeed deceived him. That breakup line had nearly cost him his life. My numb heart tore open once more. Old wounds, which had just begun to scab, now oozed fresh blood. Overwhelming emotions reached their peak, while my blood turned cold. I forced a smile, speaking softly. Yeah, if you won't help me, I'll have no choice but to seek help from others. Otherwise, should I just sit here and wait to die? A muscle twitched in Bradley Electra's forehead as he laughed coldly. Even the veins on his neck became prominent. Rosemary Adam, you're not pretending anymore in front of me. When you stopped my car last night, you weren't like this. Not in the past either. I turned my gaze away, my voice trembling. Since you won't help me, why should I keep acting? If there's nothing else, then I'll leave. But just as I took a step, he yanked me back forcefully. Bradley Electra clutched my waist tightly, teasing my tongue with bites and licks. It was an intense outburst of anger, a kind of release. Then he suddenly laughed, a dark look in his eyes. Rosemary Adam, then why don't you lie to me some more? I'll give you anything you want. I pushed him away with all my strength, my heart aching. Bradley Electra, don't go crazy. There was a moment of eerie silence in the air. But soon, Bradley Electra lost control even more violently. He felt like a string in his brain had snapped. Suddenly he raised his hand, grabbed a bottle from the table, and smashed it on the ground. Red liquid splashed everywhere, a strange aroma began to fill the air. Darkness gathered in Bradley Electra's eyes as he pinned me down onto the bed. Rosemary Adam, would you rather mix with scum than come back to me, wouldn't you? Do you even know what that old man wants to do with you? I raised my face and said word by word, whatever it is, it's none of your business. None of my business. His violent fury pressed the pause button at that moment. Bradley Electra let out a faint, almost self-mocking laugh. His chest rose and fell as he struggled to suppress his anger. His eyes glistened with a fragile red. His dark pupils stared intently at me. The way he gritted his teeth was not more threatening, but rather bitter. Once again, Bradley Electra cupped my face and kissed me recklessly. Rosemary Adam, let me help you remember what our relationship was like. I struggled fiercely, swinging my fists and kicking wildly. But Bradley Electra seemed impervious to the pain, even refusing to defend himself. He continued to kiss me stubbornly, again and again. Everywhere on my neck, collarbone, and abdomen had his bite marks. We were like two trapped beasts, tearing at each other until we were exhausted. The sound of my skirt ripping echoed piercingly in the quiet room. Suddenly, I lost all my strength, and tears streamed down. The returning sour feeling filled my heart. Bradley Electra, let me go. My voice trembled uncontrollably. It was so soft it felt like it would dissipate at any moment. My fingers unconsciously clenched the sheets before lazily releasing. Please let me go. Bradley Electra paused, and the darkness in his eyes gradually faded into indifference. After a long while, I heard him say softly, Rosemary Adam, let me go. Maybe in the next life. Calm yet cold, Bradley Electra suddenly released me, and methodically tied at his clothes. The large floor mirror reflected his tall silhouette. The expensive tailored suit made him look distinguished and aloof. His tie perfectly knotted, the cuffs folded to reveal a delicate wrist bone. And I was in disarray, with mascara smudged comically around my eyes. Bradley Electra strapped on his watch and left. The door slammed shut. The whole world fell silent again. I slowly sank onto the carpet. Tears fell uncontrollably. After fixing a perfect makeup again, I stepped out of the room. Perhaps it was due to the intense emotions. My steps felt slightly unsteady. Boss, the 2 projects we discussed suddenly fell through. I answered the phone, chilled to the bone. How is that possible? The contracts were already signed. I couldn't help but quicken my pace. A premonition looming over me. They said to follow the terms, and they'll double the penalty for breach of contract. Wait for me. I'll come back right now. My high heel twisted, pain shooting through me, but after hesitating for a few seconds, I continued toward the elevator. Just as the elevator doors opened, countless flashes of light struck me, and I almost couldn't open my eyes. Rosemary Adam, a source has revealed that you climbed into Bradley Electra's bed last night for an investment. Is that true? Were you just kicked out by Bradley Electra? Is the rumor that you pushed your father to suicide and ruined your brother true? I staggered a few steps, having no way to retreat. Get out of the way. Everyone move. Rosemary Adam and Bradley Electra are just normal business partners. Please be rational. Ursula Nancy squeezed through. Supporting me, I'll get you out. Everything happened too suddenly. I didn't have time to react and instinctively followed her. The media surrounded us tightly with cameras. But just as we were about to break free from the crowd, Ursula Nancy suddenly stopped. She smiled at me and whispered in a tone only we could hear. Rosemary Adam, why are you still showing up? This is your doing. In the next moment, Ursula Nancy casually pulled off my coat, as if it were just an accident in a crowd. The ambiguous marks on my body were fully exposed to the camera. A fleeting look of triumph flashed in her eyes. Ursula Nancy covered her face in disbelief. Tears streaming. You really? She said nothing. Yet everything was said. The journalists were in an uproar. The flashing lights speeding up. The chaotic noise flooded my ears. But I suddenly felt calm. So this is what was waiting for me. I bent down to pick up my coat and put it on, dusting it off. Nice acting earlier. I smiled at her. She played her part well, killing two birds with one stone, and managed to stay squeaky clean. Too bad her background check was still lacking. I had never been a pitiful pawn, pushing my father to jump, ruining my brother. That was all true. Ursula Nancy seemed caught off guard by my calmness, momentarily forgetting to cry. Rosemary Adam, how can you be so unloving towards yourself? I even felt pity for you. I've already convinced Bradley Electra to help the Adam family. Why would you? Before she could finish, I slapped her. The pent-up rage erupted. I grabbed her hair and rubbed her face into the ground. During that time abroad, I was so hungry I had to fight a homeless man twice my size for food. Fighting to avoid harassment became routine. Ursula Nancy, a delicate young lady from a prominent family, was no match for me. She couldn't even scream. Ursula Nancy soon crumpled to the ground, gasping weakly like a dead fish. In the horrified eyes of the onlookers, I stood up slowly, facing the camera, calmly stating, yes, I was indeed in the same room as Bradley Electra. But one thing I need to clarify, that tonight wasn't me climbing into Bradley Electra's bed, it was him wanting to climb into mine. As soon as I finished speaking, the room fell silent. I turned around, realizing too late, Bradley Electra had appeared there unbeknownst to me. The moment our eyes met, the dense crowd around us became a blur. My breath caught. I bit my lip. My heart pounded against my chest. My mind swirled with mixed speculations. Was he there to back up Ursula Nancy? If he denied it, where would that leave me in the court of public opinion? What if he pursued damages for defamation? What then? Why was every meeting after our reunion so embarrassing for me? Bradley Electra stepped forward, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Ursula Nancy propped herself up with her elbows, and reached out to him. Bradley Electra, I meant well for Rosemary Adam. Her pitiful cry abruptly stopped, because Bradley Electra skillfully dodged her contact. He stood beside me and said in a deep voice, what Rosemary Adam said is correct. My lashes fluttered, and I looked up at him. Bradley Electra did not look at me, continuing, tonight, I'm the one who got kicked out, not giving the reporters a chance to ask further. Bradley Electra scooped me up in one swift motion. I can walk myself. Bradley Electra glanced at me and tightened his grip. Rosemary Adam, I advise you to be quiet for now. In the office, an assistant knocked on the door. Bradley Electra, the ointment you wanted is here. Bradley Electra nodded slightly. The assistant passed the ointment to me. Thank you. Did he carry me because he noticed I was hurt? I momentarily froze, accepting it. Just as I twisted the cap off, Bradley Electra spoke coldly. TSK, you can't even apply ointment properly. I just couldn't twist it open for a second. He didn't allow for any argument and held my calf, his long fingers applying gentle pressure as he leaned down. With his other hand, he squeezed out the ointment, his cool fingertips making circles on my ankle. The proximity was too close. His warm breath brushed my skin. I flinched and said, I can do it myself. Is it painful? Bradley Electra frowned, his tone devoid of warmth. Not really. Such a cribbaby. Bradley Electra nearly blurted out. In an instant, it felt like my heart was grasped by an invisible hand. When I was abroad, I often shed tears to manipulate others, because I knew that Bradley Electra fell for it. I lied. telling him I had been sold into a red light district after being kidnapped on a smuggling ship, forced to do many bad things. Though I managed to escape amid the chaos, I lost all my documents and was left with nothing. I couldn't work and definitely couldn't let the police find me. If I got sent back, I could end up in prison. But at that time, Bradley Electra was just a poor student working hard to support himself. To take care of me, he had to juggle 3 jobs in a day. During busy exam periods, he even collapsed from exhaustion. But I was an ungrateful liar. Liars don't feel compassion. They only ever wish they got more. I couldn't sleep on hard floors, couldn't eat the bland food, and couldn't stand the cold apartments without heating. Bradley Electra always replied coldly, "You're such a crybaby," as if he couldn't be bothered to say even another word to me. Yet the next day, there would always be things I wanted at home. Ingredients from the supermarket, a soft mattress, and the fiery embrace only a young man can offer. That winter night felt extraordinarily long. Bradley Electra kept my cold feet in his warm embrace, allowing me to warm them on his abs. Curled up in his arms, I could hear his heartbeat falter. But come morning, I didn't hesitate to steal away all his cash, including his tuition. Bradley Electra seemed to sense my memories resurfacing. His lips parted slightly. Endure, endure. I silently repeated it in my mind, unable to suppress a laugh at myself. Rosemary Adam, this is all you're doing, isn't it? But the next moment, the pressure on my injured spot was unexpectedly gentle. The veins on the back of Bradley Electra's hand were tense, as if both love and hatred were being restrained. My heart trembled as if swept away by a flood. I curled my fingers slightly, my voice barely a whisper. "Why are you helping me?" Bradley Electra chuckled nonchalantly, glancing at me. "Rosemary Adam, you really think too highly of yourself. Still, thank you." If Bradley Electra hadn't stood up for me, no one would believe a word I said, or rather, no one would dare to believe me. Those rumors were strong enough to consume the crumbling Adam family without a trace. "Don't rush to thank me." Bradley Electra tossed me a contract, his tone mocking. "I've made mistakes before. I'm not interested in doing charity again." I glanced at it, stunned. Fake couple agreement. Bradley Electra remained unfazed. "Any problem?" "You and Ursula Nancy. I have nothing to do with her. Some clients enjoy sending women to my bed. She loves to act, so I let her be my shield, saving me a lot of trouble. But today, I was quite unhappy with her behavior, and you happen to fill in the gap." I stood up to leave. "I'm sorry, but I can't sign this. If you need my gratitude, I can repay you in other ways." Surprisingly, he didn't stop me. Bradley Electra leaned back on the sofa and smiled slightly. "Be my guest." His deep-set eyes quietly watched me, exuding a sense of victory. A sense of unease welled up inside me, and I didn't linger any longer. But just as I reached the bottom of the stairs, my phone rang. It was my secretary. Panicking, "Boss, why are you still not back? Something big has happened." Murphy Tyler's wife brought a group of people and smashed up the lobby. They claim Murphy Tyler has been beaten to the point of breaking bones, and is now comatose in the hospital. They want an explanation from you. They're in real estate and have mafia connections. We can't stop them. Also, those 2 breach compensation payments won't arrive until at least next month. Finance can't even release salaries anymore. I almost lost my balance in shock. "Got it. I'll find a way." "And your brother? What about my brother? You asked me to keep an eye on him, right?" The private investigator spotted him meeting with Bradley Electra 2 days ago. If Bradley Electra wanted to keep this hidden, my people wouldn't be able to find out. He was just putting on a show to force me to submit. Every piece fell into place like a threat. It felt like a bucket of cold water was splashed over me. I stood in silence, gazing at the bustling street below for a few seconds, before turning back towards the Electra building. Bradley Electra seemed to anticipate my return, and showed no sign of surprise. I picked up the document on the table, my voice trembling. "I'll sign." Bradley Electra raised an eyebrow and smiled, like a skilled hunter. "What does Rosemary Adam think this is? Come when you want, leave when you want." "I'm sorry. I didn't know what was good for me earlier, Rosemary Adam. But the conditions have changed now." I closed my eyes. "I'll agree to any condition. Bradley Electra stood up and walked towards the door. He paused momentarily as he passed by me. Are you coming? Or do I need to invite you? Where are we going? To register our marriage. As I sat in the car clutching the red book, I felt dazed. Bradley Electra. Don't I need to sign some prenuptial agreement or something? With his current wealth, I would be the one benefiting from this marriage. Is this truly revenge against me? Bradley Electra took the marriage certificate from my hands and tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat. I'll keep it safe. Why do we need to register? I couldn't help but ask. His expression was indifferent. Getting married makes it more convenient for me to torment you. I nodded slowly. Flashes of news stories about wives being the sole guardians of their husbands, sent to psychiatric hospitals crossed my mind. Wives unable to get the surgeries they needed because family members wouldn't sign consent, and domestic violence occurring in private where evidence was hard to come by. I unconsciously clenched my teeth, cold sweat forming in my palms. It wasn't until night fell, waiting in my home for Bradley Electra to finish work, that I discovered the torment could take many forms. He pinned me down, demanding relentlessly, over and over again. I was nearly driven to the brink of collapse by his bullying. Bradley Electra kissed the tears at the corner of my eyes with satisfaction, his voice hoarse. Rosemary Adam, do you understand your mistake now? My body snapped and softened instinctively, breath coming in shallow gasps. Yes, I was wrong. Waves of pleasure crashed over me, flooding my body, and I couldn't articulate complete words. Bradley Electra's gaze remained fixed on me, emotions buried deep in his eyes. His aggressive movements briefly paused. He spoke softly. Since you've admitted your mistake, I'll forgive you. I blinked in shock, struggling to comprehend. What did you say? But in the next instant, Bradley Electra's expression turned cold again, as if the previous tenderness was just an illusion. I gripped his sturdy arm, my legs trembling uncontrollably. As I reached my peak, I completely melted into Bradley Electra's embrace. Taking deep breaths, my eyes glazed over, unable to discern if what had just happened was real, or just a figment of my imagination. When I woke up the next morning, Bradley Electra was already gone. I glanced at the messages from my secretary on my phone, tiredly closing my eyes. With his iron fist rule, the pressure on the Adam family in the market had vanished overnight. Not even a hint of negative news could be found. But there was still a tough battle ahead. This crisis had led the Adam family's higher-ups to have doubts about my capabilities. My brother, Michael Wilson, was making a comeback. He had gathered funds to start a new company, subtly courting shareholders in an attempt to compete for the same project as me. The Adam family desperately needed a revival. If successful, this project would serve as the best proof of his turnaround. Years ago, my father announced at my 18th birthday party that my brother would inherit the company. Only then did I realize that the attention and favoritism I had received were mere smoke and mirrors. My father had elevated me to draw attention to my efforts, clearing obstacles, while distracting from the internal battles among the higher-ups. If necessary, I would become the scapegoat for their dirty deeds. In the end, my brother would reap the rewards. Once my brother ascended, fearing I would fight him to the death, he conspired to exile me overseas. He confiscated my ID and froze all my liquid assets. He hoped I would die on foreign streets. The plan was perfect, but they underestimated my ambition. Even if I previously had no ulterior motives against them, they saw me destroy files I had backed up. I turned the tables, disappearing abroad, then made a quiet return when they would least expect it. I laid before my father evidence that could ruin him, leave cleanly, maintaining some respect, or join my brother in prison. You choose. In reality, I was just trying to scare him. I didn't have anything that could directly send my brother to jail. But how much he loved my brother. He didn't dare take any risks and ultimately jumped off a building. My brother was thrown into chaos upon hearing the news, failing repeatedly in the project. In his shadow, I appeared incredibly trustworthy. The tides began to change within the upper echelons. Furthermore, my father had previously stabilized me by giving me the same shares as my brother. They simply hadn't anticipated I could still return alive. So, after my brother made a miscalculation once again, I successfully secured the position of president, and that project that led to my brother's downfall was indeed my doing. From that point on, my brother thoroughly despised me. When we cross paths again, it would surely be a life or death situation. I hadn't expected to see my brother so soon. As the elevator doors opened, Michael Wilson's eyes held a glimmer of interest upon seeing me. He stepped in slowly, his gaze landing on the button I pressed for my floor. "Long time no see, sis." I smirked slightly. "What's there to see about a defeated foe?" Michael Wilson squinted, his expression turning fierce in an instant. "Rosemary Adam, what are you so pleased about? You have no chance of winning this bid." His tone was overly confident, hinting at excitement. It was just like the time he tossed me into a neighborhood full of thugs. "Is that so?" I didn't show it on my face. "You said the same thing last time, but later, Dad died and you were left miserable, like a stray dog. Has brother forgotten so soon?" I flashed a harmless smile, my tone as light as discussing today's weather. Michael Wilson clenched his fists, a provocative expression frozen on his face. Just as I thought he was going to hit me, Michael Wilson suddenly smiled mysteriously. "Rosemary Adam, I'm starting to look forward to seeing you grovel at my feet." As the elevator reached the top floor, Michael Wilson stepped out first. I tightened my grip on the tender documents, forcing down my unease. The moment I pushed open the conference room door, I understood what Michael Wilson meant by, "You're bound to lose." Seated at the head of the table was Bradley Electra. It turned out he was the true decision-maker behind the scenes. Bradley Electra looked coldly at me, devoid of any visible emotions. The steps beneath me suddenly felt heavy as I mechanically walked to sit across from him. For the past few days, Bradley Electra had shown no smiles nor any differences in his demeanor towards me. I had almost believed we could get along. He dangled hope before me, only to shatter it entirely. Was this his plan all along? Tears welled up unexpectedly in my eyes as I bitterly tried to force a smile. Michael Wilson's gaze darted between me and Bradley Electra, taunting. "Looks like it's not your first meeting with Bradley Electra, sister." I lowered my eyes and flipped through the bid documents, reminding myself not to lose my composure. But my attention was slipping away no matter how I tried. "I'm not familiar with Bradley Electra." "Oh. What exactly are you trying to say?" "I have heard that Bradley Electra had a heartless ex-girlfriend named Rosemary Adam. Funny how they met in the country, isn't it?" I took a deep breath. "Brother, instead of gossiping, maybe you should plan where you'll be buried. There's still a spot available at Dad's place. Why don't I buy it and give it to you? After today, you really will have nothing left." Michael Wilson had already been cornered by me before. This time, he had the resources to stand against me. This was because he had signed a bet, a huge amount. Our lives hinged on this round. "My sister is so confident. Why don't you let me go first?" "Doesn't matter?" Michael Wilson sneered condescendingly, then stood up on the podium. His proposal appeared on the big screen. I froze in shock. My mood plummeted. His slides were identical to mine. Michael Wilson had stolen my plan, and in such a short time, I couldn't prove anything. My hands trembled as I held the documents, and surrounding sounds became surreal. Michael Wilson's lips moved, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. Anger and helplessness surged within me. Once Michael Wilson finished his speech, applause erupted in the room. "Rosemary Adam." Bradley Electra looked up at me, his tone distant. My heart sank slowly. With my palms pressed against the table, I slowly stood up. "Sorry, I need to use the restroom." As I brushed past, Michael Wilson wore a wild grin. I remained expressionless, ignoring him. He wanted to see me falter, to fail spectacularly. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. In the restroom, I adjusted my smile in front of the mirror, striving to stabilize my emotions. Knock, knock. A light knock at the door. Bradley Electra's gaze fell on my face. "Are you feeling unwell?" I shook off the water on my hands, and walked straight out. "Quit pretending here." I straightened my posture and started articulating fluently. But the more I spoke, the more silence fell beneath me. I clearly saw the skepticism and confusion in their eyes. Yet, the more they doubted, the calmer I appeared. Once the presentation concluded, I slightly bowed my head. "My speech is now finished." Faint murmurs of discussion arose. Michael Wilson pretended to be shocked. "Why is your proposal the same as mine? You've copied my work." I confidently stepped off the stage and replied, What evidence do you have to prove that this proposal is your original work? Michael Wilson was momentarily speechless. Now he was the one in a difficult position. His assistant leaned in and whispered to him. Michael Wilson scoffed. You copied my content and still dare to question me. I think it's you who's afraid to respond. Rosemary Adam. The completion dates are recorded. Do you dare to compare? It's obvious who came first. If Michael Wilson is saying this, he's definitely tampered with my computer beforehand. If I take the bait, things will get messy. Seeing that I didn't take the bait, he turned to Bradley Electra urgently. Bradley Electra, someone like Rosemary Adam, with such questionable character, should absolutely not be partnered with. You know all too well. Her behavior has always been questionable. I tightened my lips, unable to meet Bradley Electra's eyes. After all, I had a history with him, and this was the perfect opportunity for him to get his revenge. A terrible silence followed. Bradley Electra chuckled softly. Why would I not know she's like this? I slowly lifted my head, barely able to believe my ears. Michael Wilson stared in disbelief. Have you forgotten? She once deceived you. Bradley Electra slowly set down his pen. Just a little marital spice. What? Do you have an opinion on that? Michael Wilson was struck dumb. Things had completely exceeded his expectations. Marital spice. Bradley Electra didn't give Michael Wilson a chance to argue. He said calmly, if neither of you can provide evidence, I'll have someone investigate. Once the results are in, we'll make a decision. As for you, Michael Wilson, your remarks have obviously harmed my wife's reputation. The Electra family's legal department will pursue this. Finally regaining my composure from the shock, I nervously stared at the floor. Bradley Electra, I think I misunderstood you just now. He let out a cold chuckle. We'll settle this when we get home. Bradley Electra took my hand and intertwined our fingers. Does anyone else have objections? I weakly said. I just remembered I have evidence. The template is in your computer account. There should be a download record. Just check your computer. Bradley Electra frowned slightly. My voice was barely a whisper. It was that day. What day? I grew anxious and blurted out. The day you insisted on being in the study. You broke my computer, so I had to use yours. Everyone fell silent. Several older executives kept coughing awkwardly. Michael Wilson's face turned pale, his eyes glinting with anger. Bradley Electra remained composed, signaling for an assistant to retrieve the computer. I pulled away from him, my face flushed. Bradley Electra glanced at me, a fleeting smile on his lips. It's happened too many times. I can't remember all of them, I replied. You shouldn't say any more. The outcome was evident. Michael Wilson was utterly defeated. As I left the conference room, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief. So much so that when Michael Wilson charged at me, I didn't have time to dodge. Rosemary Adam, don't think you'll get away with this? With bloodshot eyes, Michael Wilson, in a frenzy, threw a decorative vase at my face. Instinctively I closed my eyes, but my body fell into a solid embrace. Crash! The porcelain shattered. Bradley Electra held me tightly, letting out a muffled grunt. Bradley Electra. I stared at him in horror, frantically touching his back. Bodyguards rushed in and dragged Michael Wilson away. Bradley Electra held my wrist and pulled me close. Don't be afraid. It's okay, Bradley Electra. Ha ha ha. You're such a fool. Is she worth it to you? Do you know she's a cold-blooded lunatic? She killed her own father with her own hands. Aren't you afraid the next dead person could be you? Michael Wilson kept screaming in hysteria. All eyes were on Bradley Electra. The atmosphere felt like it had been put on pause, and Bradley Electra froze. A storm brewed in his dark eyes. I gulped, my throat dry. I could admit anything in front of anyone, but I didn't want Bradley Electra to know those dirty pasts. Love can make a person weak. Would you still love me when you see my truest self? I've imagined countless times whether he would take me in if he first saw that dark side of me. Would he still be touched if he saw my sensitive, suspicious, and ruthless soul? I longed to know the answer yet feared that day would come. Every second felt like agony, like enduring an entire, lengthy winter. Finally, Bradley Electra spoke. He said, "What exactly did you do to make my wife like this? You pushed her to this point." Michael Wilson stood there, incredulous, as he responded to Bradley Electra's punch. That day Michael Wilson ended up in the hospital. What awaited him were bottomless debts. On the same day, numerous scandals involving Ursula Nancy were exposed. Previously, she had offended many, relying on her title as Mrs. Electra. Now losing her protection meant all her misdeeds returned to haunt her doubly. As soon as we entered the villa, Bradley Electra pulled me close and kissed me, wild and uncontrollable, mixed with emotions that were hard to express, as though the joys and sorrows of the years had burst forth. Rosemary Adam, tell me you love me. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my cheeks wet with tears. I love you. In response was a more intense kiss, nearly a bite. His grip was so firm it felt like he wanted to meld me into him. Actually, after I settled down back home, I sent the money back, but you had already moved, and I couldn't reach you. Eventually, I was too embarrassed to see you again. Rosemary Adam, all these years, what I cared about was never money, until I was utterly exhausted. Bradley Electra finally let me go, gently holding my chin as he kissed me, the gloom in his eyes gradually lifting. Do you remember when we first met? I remember. I fell in front of your bicycle to scam you. It was a rainy day. You took all that homeless man's things, when he stepped out and dumped them in the trash, framing it on those rich kids, who bothered me. Staring at him in disbelief, my pupils trembled. Back then, we didn't know each other at all. You just happened to see me being teased by classmates a few times while wandering nearby. At that moment, it would have been wise to turn a blind eye. Yet you chose to help me in silence. When I went after the Adam family, you weren't defenseless, but you still staged a pity act to make everyone believe the Adams were finished, luring out the traitor and your brother, Rosemary Adam. I knew from the start that you weren't some pathetic little rabbit, but I also knew you weren't that selfish, heartless lunatic they described. I knew every time you used me, but I willingly let it happen. I just hated how mercilessly you left and how you didn't believe I would love you. I didn't understand why you kept pushing me away, even though you were clearly unwilling to let go. Now I think I somewhat understand growing up in such a twisted family. You've done more than enough. He looked at me seriously. I'm sorry for getting so angry at you before. I held him tighter. It was I who deceived you first. That's the truth. Maybe it's because I've never been firmly chosen. In the past or in our reunion, I didn't know how to express myself, and didn't know how to face you. Somewhere deep down, I always felt I should keep my distance from you. I feared you'd hate me even more for the things I did over the years. Bradley Electra raised a hand to wipe away my tears. Rosemary Adam, it's fine if you can't love. From now on, I'll love you enough for both of us. This story is now complete. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for the latest content, as many novels are updated daily.